Lot to unpack. Let's bring Nile Gardiner in. Nile, at one point, was an aide to the then British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. Good to see you, sir. Let me start. We'll talk trade for the next few minutes, and let me start on the China comment that the president made in sending his Treasury Secretary over there in, as he said, a few days. What do you make of that development?
Well, that's very interesting. Of course, President Trump has certainly been very tough on the China trade front. He certainly sent a very clear message to Beijing that it's no longer business as usual. But at the same time, of course, the United States is keen, I think, to avoid any kind of trade war with China. And you have seen the messaging, I think, in the last couple of weeks or so from the White House, certainly being more conciliatory, I think, with regard to overall trade with China. I think that President Trump has an acute sense of the impact of a potential trade war on the U.S. Stock market. Right. So I think he's being rather cautious, actually. But interesting comments, of course, today as well on the European Union and trade.
Yeah. The European Union comments were very, very interesting because the president drew this line of saying, hey, listen, I'd love to deal with France directly. And he says this about all the countries that he meets with, for the most part. I covered the meeting with Shinzo Abe, the Japanese prime minister. Same type of thing. We'd like to deal bilaterally as opposed to with groups of nations. And at that point, it was a question about TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. But at this point, it's about the European Union. What are the ramifications of that, do you think?
Yeah, a very significant discussion of trade this morning. And clearly, President Trump is no fan of the European Union. No. And, of course, members of the European Union are unable to negotiate their own trade agreements with the United States. And that, of course, is a sore point, I think, for the White House. President Trump would much larger deal, much more willing to deal, of course, directly with France in terms of bilateral trade rather than working through the European Union. And so France, as a member of the EU customs union, is not able to negotiate its own trade agreements. And, of course, there's a great deal of trade between France and the United States. So clearly, President Trump was projecting a Eurosceptic message from Washington. He's a believer in bilateral trade deals rather than these big multilateral trade deals, for example, such as the TTIP, the Transatlantic Trade Investment Partnership, which certainly is dead in the water at the moment.
Some irony, though, don't you think, in that the first state dinner and state visit that the president is hosting is with the French president, and he talks about bilateral trade, and, there is an opportunity for bilateral trade, just by the way things have worked out with Brexit and everything with the UK. But that's not the leader that's here.
Yeah, it is very interesting. I think that, Emmanuel Macron has played his cards very well with regard to his relationship with President Trump. He, from a very early stage, extended the hand of friendship to President Trump, and you've seen a very close working partnership between Emmanuel Macron and Donald Trump. Having said that, I do think the US-UK special relationship remains the most important bilateral partnership for the United States. President Trump is expected to travel to London in July this year, and I'm sure it's only a matter of time before the British Prime Minister comes over for a state visit as well.
I guess, but it seems rather strained, doesn't it? And it's fair to say, between the president and Prime Minister May, isn't it?
Yeah, I think, it's important to bear in mind, of course, that Emmanuel Macron has far more executive power in France as opposed to the British Prime Minister. There certainly has been a lot of pushback against Donald Trump in Britain, especially from some parts of the British political spectrum, especially the Labour Party. Right. But also the Speaker of the House of Commons expresses strong opposition to Trump visiting. The Mayor of London has been strongly opposed. So Theresa May has had to put up, I think, with a fair amount of opposition back home in Great Britain to the Trump presidency. I think Emmanuel Macron hasn't had those kinds of sort of barriers actually to deal with.
What do you make of this personal relationship as a final question, Nigel? We were just showing video, we continued to, of the two presidents in the Oval Office from earlier today while you were speaking in your last answer, and there was this kind of lighthearted moment where President Trump jokes around with President Macron, and he says, oh, you got a little dandruff on your shoulder, and he wipes it off and that kind of thing. I mean, you have a 71-year-old president of the United... There he is. Hey, look at that. Look, our producers paid attention to us when we're on the air like that and told us a little bit of dandruff on the shoulder, right? You got a 71-year-old president of the United States, 40-year-old president of France. Don't seem to really agree on a whole heck of a lot, right? You have this populist kind of nationalist leader here in the U.S., certainly globalist in Macron, but at the same time have come together personally What do you think brings them together, and what's the significance of whatever it is that brings them together?
That's a very good question. I think both of them, both Trump and Macron, see themselves as political outsiders who won against all the odds. And I think that's a very important point, bringing the two together. But also, I think that, Macron he's an extremely pragmatic politician. He's also a great showman as well. And he understands clearly that if France is to have any influence on the world stage, it's got to be close to the world's superpower. And so you've got to give Macron credit, actually, for building up this friendship with Donald Trump. But let's not forget, of course, there are very deep-rooted differences ideologically between the two leaders. And I think you're going to see that play out significantly on the Iran nuclear question.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one place the president said they've had talks of substance and thinks they can get something done. But it's clear there's a long way to go. Niall, good to see you. And thanks for coming out. I appreciate the analysis today. Nile Gardiner with us.